Welcome to Vayse, a podcast about weird stuff. I'm Peter C. Hine.
And I'm Stephen James Buckley.
And today it's our great pleasure to have joining us author, journalist, green witch and Reiki master, Jenn Lane. Hello, Jenn.
Hi there. Thanks so much for having me.
It's a real pleasure. We're embarrassed to say that you're actually the first female guest we've had on Vayse yet. You're also the first witch, and so we're really super excited to talk to you today about all this stuff.
Well, I'm very honoured. And yes, very excited to talk about witchcraft, green witchcraft in particular.
You have a really, really impressive CV. You've written for Vogue, Guardian, BBC, the Wildlife Trust, the RSPB. I recently read an article about you in the iPaper as well. And I was actually introduced to your work through The Wheel, which is, I think that was your first published book, was it?
It was, yes. It came out at the end of 2021, which feels like forever ago now.
It really
it's still,
does.
it's still, I was in Waterstones the other day picking up an ordnance survey map, which is another story entirely. But I happened upon the occult and witchcraft section, and there was The Wheel right in the middle.
Pride of place. Honestly.
So it's still going strong. Going strong.
I came across your book on Amazon, actually, of all places. We don't always sort of recommend Amazon as the place for people to buy books, but the algorithms were really in your favour. It was recommended to me repeatedly, and I don't just buy stuff off their recommendations, but I read a few reviews, and they were absolutely stunning reviews. It was really impressive. So I ordered the book, and I absolutely devoured it. It's one of my favourite books that I read last year. It's really, really gorgeous. It's evocative, it's powerful, and it's really, really thought-provoking. Could you talk a little bit about The Wheel and what it's about?
Yes, of course. So I began writing The Wheel right in the middle of the pandemic, when I had a bit of time to get my life sorted. So basically, The Wheel is my journey from living in the city, being incredibly stressed and burnt out to the point where I was experiencing these really quite shocking physical symptoms that I didn't know what to do with. I was going to A&E every other week thinking that my whole body was falling apart. But really it was the stresses and strains of working in a job that didn't resonate with me, and living in this busy city environment, because I think so many people can resonate with that. We live in these places that we're not designed to live in. The human body hasn't caught up with the fact that technologically we've become more advanced. I think we still all want to be living close to the fields. So basically, I was physically and emotionally stressed from that, and I decided to take a break. And what I wanted to do was reconnect with the witchcraft that I had loved so much as a teenager. I used to be obsessed with Charmed, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, all those things, and that led quite naturally. I can see your hand go up. Yes, we all were.
The Craft as well.
The Craft.
Oh, yes.
My first love. Yes. So all this stuff in popular culture was pointing teenage me towards witchcraft, and that's where I went quite naturally. And for me, connecting with witchcraft as a teenager was just this wonderful experience where I got to be outside, all the time and look at the moon every night. And, people weren't really talking about that when we were 13, 14. So it felt like something very special to me. And so when I had this work break, I decided to reconnect with that element of my life, and witchcraft just took over. So in 2019 I began my witchcraft journey all over again, and The Wheel is my journey of discovery, going through the seasons, going through the pagan wheel of the year, so the 8 different witches' festivals, and basically healing my body and mind from this incredibly stressful experience and just falling back in love with nature.
It really, really does resonate with me as well, this book, and for a lot of the reasons that you've just said. I hadn't even got all the way through it before I just forced it into Buckley's hands when we were having coffee one day in Manchester. One of the things that struck me so much about it was how much it had mirrored mine and Buckley's experience of actually starting this podcast. I think we'd both living in cities. I'd been living in Manchester for years, but Buckley over in Preston, and we were meeting up and just naturally going for longer and longer walks in the countryside and reconnecting with nature, and that's led us through a journey which paralleled yours in some ways to where we are now, doing this podcast. I have a magical practice, and we really felt that it really resonated with us, because I'd been feeling disconnected as well, and being able to get out into nature and it's almost like a coping mechanism for me now. And another thing that really struck us about this book is that it was written largely about the north of England, which is where we're both from. And I think it's quite a magical place, the north of England, anyway.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I feel like all of the nature books that I've read in the past, I'm obviously big on nature. I used to work for the RSPB in conservation. And so, yes, for me, having all of those southern focused books didn't really sit well with me. And I really wanted to make this book about the places that I knew and loved.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really comes across, the sense of place and the sense of the beauty and the awe of nature within it, especially when places that I can picture so clearly that are in the book, like Pendle Hill, places in Silverdale and so on, is really, really powerful, really. So I met you at a signing at Crooked Books, which was when I was going to buy my second copy of The Wheel, which I actually have here now.
With the new cover.
Yes, yeah, that's it. I recommend that all people buy both copies as well, because both of them look beautiful.
All people.
All people buy both copies. All people buy both copies.
That's a really weird way of saying everyone. All people.
Always a critic. All people are always critics. But I thought if Jennifer Lane is nice and friendly when I speak to her, I'll ask her to come on the podcast, because I'd connected with that book so much, and I was so pleased when you agreed to come on. So when you mentioned about for such a long time you'd been into witchcraft as a youngster, what came first for you? Was it the writing or the witchcraft, or have they always gone hand in hand for you?
I think they've always gone hand in hand. I've wanted to write for as long as I can remember. I remember sitting in my room, imagining myself as like a magazine editor, age 18, piecing together my own magazines. But I suppose my first real love was witchcraft. That was the thing that I became obsessed with. So it started off with hours drawing ancient runes in my books very late into the night, and reading witchcraft books by candlelight. And I was very lucky enough to have supportive parents who would take me to Borders or Waterstones and just pick what you want. And I'm like, wow, that's I can't imagine many people's parents doing that for a 13 or 14-year-old. So I'm so grateful because I was just able to find out this wealth of information. And then that kind of went on to astral projection, herbs, all different forms of spirituality that fall under the bracket of paganism. And so I did just gather this wealth of knowledge as a teenager. So when I returned to it in my late 20s, it all just kind of toppled back into place in this really nice way, because I was thought, oh yeah, I actually remember doing that, on my bedroom floor when I was 15 or something. So it all just kind of fit back together.
Fantastic. And you mentioned earlier, and I have it in my notes here, that you consider yourself to be a green witch. Could you explain for our listeners what that is and what that means?
Yes. So I think there's two strands really, because a green witch is someone who really appreciates nature, wants to spend time in it, takes their shoes off on the grass and really wants to ground themselves. They have this real deep affinity with the element of earth, I think in particular. And so there's this kind of deep groundedness to them. But also there's that element of kitchen witchery as well, collecting herbs, gathering, drying herbs, storing and creating tinctures. And that's something that I do as well. So every time I go outside, I have this wonderful connection with nature where I feel like I can name the trees, I can feel their personalities, I can sense what they're feeling that day. And maybe if they're not feeling so good, I might give them some of my own energy just to give them a little boost. But a lot of the time it's around knowing where herbs are going to be and then storing them. And then I create a lot of teas and infusions. So I would say that green witches have a real working knowledge of herb lore, and they can use it to heal people.
That's really, really great description of it. When I was reading your book, I felt sort of an affinity for the type of magic that you were talking about within it. I kind of considered myself a chaos magician up until that point, but I realised that my practice is actually I think, a lot more devotional than a standard chaos practice would be. And I think I owe that to the bits of witchcraft that I've sort of picked up along the way. You know, I particularly to nature, I do a lot of work with trees, really. You know, like this is going to go into the woo-woo stuff. You know, I picture myself as a tree a lot. I use a tree as my Axis Monday. There's one particular tree that I like, which is a really nice oak tree, which is in the woods near to my house, which I try to visit daily, and I use a lot in my magical practice. And I started to realise that a lot of that probably came more from the witchcraft side than it would from the sort of standard sort of Western magical tradition that you would say, you know, from the Golden Dawn and that kind of thing. Okay, so I thought we'd talk now a little bit about why we've got you on the podcast. So partly by accident, fortuitous accident, partly by design. We're recording this today on what's commonly known as Blue Monday. So Blue Monday is commonly known to be the most depressing day of the year. It normally falls on the third Monday of January, which is today, the 16th of January, when we're recording this. I'm a little bit dubious about whether it's real or not, because it was actually, like, if you go back to about 2005 when this first surfaced, it was actually a gimmick by a travel company called Sky Travel. But what it symbolises, I think, is actually very real, because at this time of year, you've got the bad weather, you've got the longer nights, you've got the dip in your mood after the festive period when you've been off work, and also it's the middle of the month, so you've still got the rest of the month to go. A lot of people get paid at the end of the month, so they're suffering from that after Christmas.
And you've got that thing where you're like, you start writing the dates and you're still writing 2022, and you've got to go back and rewrite them all with 2023.
All the time.
And that does really get you down.
It's nightmarish.
But apparently scientists have completely discredited this theory as baseless pseudoscience, but they would say that. The thing that we want to talk to you about today, Jenn, is the connection between witchcraft, magic, nature, and well-being and self-care. So anyone who's read The Wheel will know why you're the ideal person to talk about this. Because at the beginning of The Wheel, as you've mentioned earlier, you were really quite ill. Could you talk a bit about your sort of journey from this sort of illness and stress, and how do you think that fully embracing nature, witchcraft and magic affected your health and well-being?
Yeah, definitely. So I think when I first started falling back into those rhythms of nature and observing the festivals, so the first one that I observed in that particular year was the Festival of Yule, and that forms, it's the first day of winter, it's the winter solstice. And usually that was a time when I would be like peak seasonal affective disorder. I, have really suffered with that, like traditionally, like over the years, and yet really struggling with like feeling motivated and also just feeling, I'll just say it, feeling very depressed at that time of year. But because I was looking at Yule from a new perspective, I was finding the magical elements of it. I performed a ritual. It was also very close to a full moon as well. So I think I was just able to notice all these little things surrounding that festival that I would have just breezed over usually. And so that level of mindfulness really brought me back to myself. But something that's really wonderful about the Pagan Wheel of the Year is that it's very propulsive. There's 8 festivals and there's around 6 weeks between each one. So there's never too long to wait until you've got something else to celebrate. So if you look at a Christian calendar, you've maybe got Easter, Christmas, a couple of other things scattered in between that, you can take or leave. But with this wonderful structure of the cyclical calendar, there's something really wonderful about that, because you can dive into it and you know there's something coming up. So yes, right now it is the bleak midwinter. We're right in the middle of January. It's been snowing here today, and I'm guessing it's been snowing where you are as well.
It's been very cold here, but not.
Yeah, we've not had
frozen.
any snow. Everything is frozen. All the puddles are frozen and everything, but we've not actually had any snow yet.
I've not even got frozen puddles. I was able to cycle today just fine, smooth. But it's felt cold enough. That's why I've got a dressing gown on.
Yeah.
I'm pretending that I don't wear a dressing gown always, but I do.
I had planned to wear something.
Yeah, normally I wear a tuxedo for these interviews, but today I'm wearing a dressing gown.
Next time. Yeah, I definitely planned on wearing something witchy today, but no, I thought I've got a hot water bottle instead.
Nice.
So basically, yes, we're right in the middle of winter, but there's the festival of Imbolc coming up. Imbolc, pronunciations vary, but on the 1st of February, that's a very traditional start of spring, when we first start to notice the newborn lambs, the fresh shoots of grass, lesser celandine and wood anemone are out at that time of year. So I think that being able to notice these wonderful things within nature that we would perhaps breeze past usually, it just brings that extra level of mindfulness. And for me, that was the very starting point for my mental health recovery journey, because before Yule, I honestly think I was like the worst I'd been in my life. I was such a mess. But slowly over the course of that year, being able to observe those festivals and also find that community as well. There's something really wonderful about witchcraft in that we're always trying to seek each other out. I think maybe we naturally cross paths. But I do feel like the community is incredibly welcoming. A lot of people may have said in the past that there's quite a lot of gatekeeping that goes on, but I haven't really found that in my experience with returning to the witchcraft world. I know that when I was living in London a few years ago, I was welcomed to like open circles at Treadwell's bookshop, and that was open to everybody, no matter what your path might be, no questions asked. And I really, really enjoy that aspect of witchcraft, is that people are willing to embrace you, and finding that community can be such this like supportive network for your mental health as well. So yeah, I think that it was getting out in nature, but also finding those people who could really be really supportive of you.
Yeah, and are you a solo practitioner, or are you part of a coven?
So I have always been a solo practitioner. I come together with people perhaps a couple of times a year on Samhain or Letha to do a bigger celebration. But for me, witchcraft is incredibly personal, and I do like to do a lot of like trance work, inner work, shadow work, and that, lends itself to being alone. I completely see the benefits of why people would want to be part of a coven. It's something that I personally, it doesn't really resonate with me and the way that I am as a person, because I am such an introvert, perhaps the most introverted person I know.
I'm the same. I'm an absolute introvert, and the idea of being part of a coven or a magical organisation feels like a lot of extra admin to sort of get through before I'd get to the good stuff.
I think one of the things that I've noticed, I'm not a magic practitioner myself, but I do believe it is real. And I do believe, I've read plenty about it, and I think that there are people who can manipulate reality in whichever way you choose to kind of word that. One of the things I've noticed is that it's very much similar to a creative pursuit in the way that people. So I've seen Hine here, sort of start his magical practice and read about different things, pick up different things, try different things. And it's almost like picking an art medium. Do I prefer to draw with paints or pencils or pastels or sculpture? It's almost like you've got something in you that is it's like a creative need to do things, and you're just kind of choosing your kind of means of expressing that almost through magic. And it seems like a very creative thing, which I think that came out when I read your book as well. Like, it's like you kind of like the way that you sort of, let's try the shamanic drumming kind of side of things. It's like you're kind of adding different things into the pot almost.
Definitely,
It's like you're making something.
Yeah, there's it's this element of like being quite eclectic and just seeing how those things sit with you. There's been some things within witchcraft that I've tried and I've really just it's like been a barrier to me. I've just thought, no, I don't understand this and it doesn't feel right. But I tend to go off the energy. Like I might try something a couple of times and if it doesn't sit well with me, I will leave it. So I mentioned in the book, there was a particular god that I decided to work with, went out to the forest to connect with them, and they came along. I don't know how other people experience gods and goddesses, but I do see them as quite a real physical manifestation. And for me, it wasn't working. I did not like their energy at all. So I decided to leave them alone and never worked with them again. But for me, like looking at other gods and goddesses, so I work quite closely with the goddess Breed or Bridget. And for me, like she is the one. Like we're like partners in crime sometimes, and I absolutely adore that. But yes, you mentioned the shamanic drumming, and that's another thing that's not necessarily a part of witchcraft, but I suppose does fall under paganism as a whole, or general spiritual practice. And you can weave that in, and I think that's something that's really wonderful about witchcraft that you don't get in other spiritual paths. It tends to be quite dictated to you. You can and can't do this. These are the rules. Within witchcraft, not so much. A lot of people practice paths that I wouldn't go down maybe. So perhaps like those more negative forms of witchcraft that look at like manipulation of realities or of perhaps even people. And for me, that's not something that sits well with my own practice, but I can see why people might want to do that. And I think it's a perfectly valid thing to do. We're all learning, we're constantly gathering information. And it's just sometimes interesting to try different things out once in a while.
Absolutely, yeah, I completely agree with that. And similar to you, I find myself happier, I think, when I'm connecting to sort of a natural energy, when I'm doing my magical practice. And very similar to what you've just described, a lot of my stranger experiences with magic have been when I'm out in the woods and you catch a strange sort of energy and I've talked about this previously on the podcast, so I won't go into it all again, but I had quite a terrifying experience, quite similar to what you've described with Pan, and it was it turned very quickly from something beautiful to something terrifying.
Yes.
But that's exactly like nature, though, isn't it? Because nature does the exact same thing. In one breath it can be beautiful, and in the next it can be destructive and dangerous. And I think that is just part of what you get tuned into when you start practicing magic.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that particularly if you're working with elementals like the Fae or with salamanders or any kind of elemental like that, they can be so changeable. Their environment doesn't like follow the same like linear timeline as us. So, things might change more quickly for them or more slowly. I think, I mentioned it in the book, I had an experience with the Fae that's kind of put me off a little bit for life. Like maybe I would be interested in a few years to have another go at engaging with them. But for me, it was such an all-encompassing, terrifying experience that I have decided to just put that to bed for a little while until perhaps I've done more research and know more. I think you can go into a situation where you want to connect, you feel an affinity with a deity or an elemental without really having met them before, and you go into it with like all guns blazing, like today is the day I'm going to meet this wonderful creature, and it does not go according to plan, and you're kind of blindsided. You just don't know what to do. But yes, I think, if you are dealing with forces that you're not quite sure about, it's always very worth doing your research beforehand.
Yeah, definitely. That's really good advice.
Do you do any kind of protective practice, anything to kind of almost protect you from potential darkness, if you want to call it that? Or
like magical hygiene and that kind of thing. Do you do any banishing rituals or anything like that?
Yeah, banishing rituals, protection rituals. I always wear my amethyst everywhere I go. And if I tend to be going into a situation where I know there'll be lots of people around me. So, just anywhere in public that has lots of people, I will do this thing where I kind of zip up my energy from the ground up to keep myself protected, kind of lock myself away. And that kind of like lets you go under the radar a little bit, but also it keeps your energy safe. So yeah, just those basic things. And, my house is full of cleansing materials, and also because I practice Reiki as well, I tend to keep my space cleansed pretty much all the time so that I can go straight into a Reiki session. I'm not always the best at it. I try to be. I think ideally I would be doing it every day, doing some sort of meditation practice, but I think we all know just how life gets, and we want to be doing those things, but it's not always possible.
No.
Because there's something that struck me it's just come to me now, was that people will often talk about the potential dangers of magic and how you should be grounded in reality. That was air quotes, by the way, to the listeners. You should be grounded in reality and be careful of dabbling in magic and witchcraft and the occult or whatever. But in your situation, it's kind of been the other way around, where reality was actually the thing which was making you ill and causing you harm. And it was actually kind of moving away from that and more towards what the consensus would call fantastical or whatever. But, this alternate way of looking at things actually was the thing which brought you the most comfort and healing.
That's so true.
And it turned out not to be damaging, whereas it was the quote normal life that was actually a lot worse for you.
Where I was in my life at that time, I was kind of living in this very traditionally masculine environment. It was very fast-paced and very demanding. And what I hadn't done was slow down and incorporate that yin element into my life, which I do a lot more. And I think witchcraft lends itself quite naturally to that feminine element, and just to have that balance of the go-getting modern world, but also that relaxation and rest and recuperation. Witchcraft there's a lot of women who practice this, perhaps more women than men across the world. And I think there's a reason for that sometimes. I do feel like sometimes women feel that they have to compete with this really almost aggressively fast energy, when really they want to be slipping into what they feel more comfortable with, which tends to be which can sometimes be that yin element. So that's something that I've definitely found within witchcraft is just creating that balance within my own life has helped.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, and one that does come across really well in the wheel. And I think it's something that I think our listeners will really benefit from if they read this book, because the book is written from quite a feminine perspective. But that was something that I found really useful and really helpful when I read it, because I feel like that's something that perhaps because I also work in a corporate environment which is quite masculine driven. And obviously it made me think also that I have to embrace that other energy, what you referred to as the yin energy, something more feminine, something more healing and caring, and something which is really, really easy to overlook. I mean, you say in the wheel that as many as half of all sick days in the UK are as a result of stress, which is absolutely remarkable. Why do you think that burnout is so common in our culture today?
So I think it's like I mentioned before about how our bodies just haven't caught up with the environment that's being created. And yes, all these technological advancements are, so helpful, so wonderful for the majority of us in the West. But there is this part of us that is still living in, 1600, where, you might have had to walk a mile or two for a glass of water, that kind of thing.
I really like your social media presence. I really like the way that you curate your Instagram, and all of your online, your website's really, really good. It's obviously something that's, witch talk, as they call it, is really, really popular, and it's getting, although obviously there is a negative side to that, it is getting out ideas of the practice and the craft to a lot of different people all the time, which is really, really, I think, important. But how do you think that we find a balance between advancements that are obviously really helpful, because modern technology has given us stuff like the COVID vaccine or directed cancer treatments, and all that kind of thing. It's also allowing us to talk across miles at the moment, right now, and get this out to listeners. But how do you think that we can create a world in which we balance this advancing technology, which sometimes seems to be running our lives? We sometimes feel like we're slaves to dopamine. The technology creates, curates, and sets out every aspect of our life for us. How do you think that we can take a step back and create a balance there?
I think there's that element of digital hygiene that a lot of us could be better at. I sometimes fall into the trap of not practicing what I preach, and I feel like my social media is very focused on helping others to switch off and to make sure that they have the time they need to heal. But actually, sometimes I end up running myself into the ground producing content when I should be resting. So I think that's something we can all get better at. But really, I do think that having an allocated hour or two of the day that we spend online, doing our admin that we all need to do, but also getting out and enjoying nature. I think that one of the most helpful things for me has been walking the same route every single day. And I find that noticing those small changes over a particular area has just been so grounding for me. It helps bring me back to myself. I get to know, like I said, I get to know the energies of certain creatures or plants or trees that are there, and I always know where the herbs are. Before that, when I was just living very much focused on my phone, on my screen, and spending 12 plus hours a day online for work or otherwise, I didn't know what was outside my window. I didn't know what the weather was like. I didn't know what moon cycle we were in. So I think maybe just making sure that we have that knowledge close to us, like even an app on our phone that tells us what the moon phase will be, so we can use technology to really advance our witchcraft practice if we want, and our observations of the natural world. For instance, I found out most of my information about herbs online rather than in a book, because it's so readily available. And this Witch Talk has been this wonderful tool in sharing the gift of knowledge within witchcraft. So there's these wonderful things that can help us. But yes, there is that digital hygiene where we do need to switch off and reconnect with the earth. And something that also really helps me is literally just going outside and putting my face straight on the earth, making sure that I connect with my third eye right to the ground to absorb that energy. It's so easy to get swept away with it all.
Again, another reason why people might feel worse mentally in the winter could be something to do with the fact that we don't, in the winter, tend to spend as much time in nature anyway, because it's not as pleasant, is it? Like I walk in the countryside a lot, but not in the winter, because it's just cold and wet and it doesn't look as nice. And whereas in the summer you're out there and you can see all these forms which are growing and the shape of them, and they're moving and they're alive, and whereas in the winter it's just not got the same appeal, and so you don't go out as much, you're spending more time inside, and that actually just compounds it, doesn't it? It makes you feel worse.
It's true, but I had to force myself outside today a couple of times. I was like, right, I'm going out no matter what the weather. But winter is also that wonderful time of turning in on ourselves, and we can do a lot of the work that we've been perhaps shirking over the summer. Like in the summer months, we are outside. We can look down at our phones or our pedometer and say, oh, I've been outside for 5 hours and I've done 20,000 steps, that kind of thing. But really, in the winter, it is that traditional time of slowing down and looking inward, doing some reflection. Shadow work has become very popular as an aspect of a witchcraft practice, something that we'll all find on Witch Talk if we have a look at there. But yes, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing staying inside, so long as we're just very mindful of it. Say, I'm staying inside for a reason because I'm doing the inner work, not just staying inside and scrolling. I think maybe we have to reframe it and look at another reason why we're staying inside to do that inner healing.
I think that's really insightful, because I've started, especially since reading your book, I suffer from seasonal affective disorder as well. I've started to find that there is a strange sort of creative energy which I have in winter, which I don't necessarily have in summer. And it is a very introspective thing. But things like, I find it easier in winter to dig deep when I'm doing writing and that kind of thing. And I also find that I've found, having started my magical practice last year in the summer, that I've kind of dug deeper into myself when doing my magical practice in the winter. It's been far more directed inwards, whereas in the summer I was out in the woods and I was looking at all these things, and I was connecting with animals and the sort of the trees, and everything looked splendid. And now, I get up and it's dark, and I get home from work and it's dark. But to even just walking outside in the darkness and being there in the darkness has let me, if I allow it to, access a kind of creativity which I couldn't probably access as easily in the summer, if that makes any sense at all.
No, that's amazing. How does it manifest for you? Like, what are you doing? Are you writing things down or
writing things down?
Yeah.
I've been taking walks in the darkness, so walking in the woods in the dark, which I wouldn't recommend that people do that everywhere. I live in a very, very quiet place in the country, and so I walk in the darkness. Just when I'm taking my dog out, maybe, and I walk in, and I think and I write ideas down, and then I structure things, and I work slowly on writing ideas and that kind of thing. And that is where I find access to these ideas which I probably shy away from in the summer. Maybe some darker aspects, which I think will connect to the shadow work that you were talking about earlier. And I have been trying to make something of these ideas. Last year, me and Buckley actually did it with an album that we were writing, and I did the same thing then. I sort of went into perhaps a slightly darker place than I would normally.
I don't know, very dark place.
Yeah, I found it very fulfilling, but I had to really force myself to do it. I was lacking the motivation, but once I dug beyond that, I found that I'd got quite deep. I don't know if that's something that you experience as well.
Oh, 100%. I've written some very dark fiction in the winter, yeah. And then in the summer, I'm just like, I'll just do a little sprinkling of poetry. That'll be lovely. That's all I need today to get me through. Absolutely. But yes, there is that element of darkness, and it reflects in your creative work, perhaps because you're processing your own emotions at that time. But yeah, I think there's this, I don't know if it's a new idea within witchcraft, but just doing your inner work and healing to be the best person that you are, so that you can put quality energy out there to affect the whole, to affect the collective consciousness. Doing your inner work is beneficial to the world, not just to you.
That's an interesting way of looking at it, really. Sort of from someone who doesn't have a strict magic practice in any way, but the idea that someone would think about it in that way seems, a lot of what I've read about magic seems very, this is how I discovered this, or how I achieved this, or how I connected with this thing, or whatever, rather than something that's a bit more helping the general population and the universe in general. Maybe I'm just reading the wrong books, I don't know.
No, I suppose I have that.
You see what I mean, though?
Yeah, no, completely. I think that maybe like the form of witchcraft that I practice, it has that element of like cunning folk, cunning people, and that kind of like village witchcraft where you would be like the healer in the community. It's something that really resonates with me, is that I think that when I wrote the book, and also when I generally practice witchcraft, is that I want it to be for a good reason, like for helping people. I think by sharing my journey in the wheel, I was hoping that other people might recognize themselves in that and see that there is a way forward through depression, through anxiety, through all those symptoms that I was experiencing, because they're so common. I was hoping that, you know, people would see that this is a pathway to healing as well. But yes, I love to think of myself as a cunning person in my kitchen, you know, fixing a few herbs together and sending them out to people on my street who've got a few aches and pains. It makes me feel good about myself. It helps the community. So I think that witchcraft can be this really positive force within a local place.
Absolutely. I really love that. And that's obviously how a few of your different practices have that sort of synergy, you know, because you've got your Reiki practice and the shamanic thing as well, is that all of those things are all about healing. And that's something that comes across really, really strongly in your book. In terms of nature, what do you think it is that unites a magic practitioner, particularly of the sort that you are, with nature? Do you think that magic comes from nature?
I think that they're one and the same. I think they're made of like the same fabric, and that I don't, this is a personal perspective, I don't know how other people feel, but I really don't feel like you could call yourself a witch or a pagan practitioner without having a deep connection with the earth. Because for me, they're just synonymous. Going outside in a rainstorm or, you know, in bright sunshine, and, you know, feeling those elements on my skin, that makes me feel connected to magic. It makes me feel connected to spirit, to the gods and goddesses that I would call as part of my practice. So for me, it is all just the same thing in like different packaging. So I think that if I wasn't connected to nature, I don't know how I would connect to spirit. That is my way forward. That is my link. But obviously there are so many different forms of witchcraft that there'll be differing opinions. But that is just, for me, that is the strongest way that I can connect with my spirituality.
So that kind of brings us on to something that I wanted to talk about, which is your upcoming book. So you were saying The Wheel was out in 2021. Was it? Which does seem like a long time ago now.
It
but
does. It's so weird. And it had, you know, last year it had a resurgence with its brand new cover. So it all kind of feels a little bit fresh in my head.
Yeah, and you've been on a book tour as well, haven't you? Which seemed exhaustive when I could see on you, because I caught up with you at Crooked Books in Hebden Bridge, which is a shop that I really like. But you went.
Great.
It is really good. Yeah,
It's wonderful.
Did you go across the whole country, or was it based in the north? Or
it was mainly based in the north, and yeah, a couple of things in London as well. But yes, it was so interesting. You know, my first book tour, didn't know what to expect, but it was just, honestly, it just felt so positive. But I think that's because of the message behind the book. It really is about healing, and people. Yeah. We're in this space where we need such deep healing that people were coming for the book.
It's not the kind of book that I imagine would attract a negative crowd. Like you see some of the kind of magic community can be a little bit gatekeepy or a little bit nasty to one another, perhaps, on certain social media platforms. But the vibe of your book is one that's a lot more community, and like open. You mentioned before that you'd not really experienced the gatekeeping, and I think it's like the sort of message that's in that book doesn't really lend itself to that. People who are going to be like that about things aren't going to be interesting. Yeah, exactly. In reading a book like that, like when I read the book, I felt good. Like it was a nice feeling. It was like a nice feeling of sort of, it was quite a comforting book almost. And then I suppose sort of, I just like how it wasn't all negative. That's what I'm trying to say.
No, I'm so glad to hear that. But yes, I know what you mean. Like people can be gatekeepery, because I've had experiences where, like, a few years ago when I wanted to join a coven, and so I kind of went to an interview where they had to like see if you're a good fit for the group, and it was all very, very strange because you felt like you had to be on your best behaviour. But yes, it was just a very different feel. Like you felt like you had to fit into some kind of magical type. Whereas I think the form of witchcraft I practice does tend to be more open. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think like the idea of having to fit into a type, that, if we're looking at magic as being an art in the creative sense, then that's the absolute best way to completely extinguish any flame creatively from that art, is to like say, right, you've got to do it like this. It's like it becomes a job at that point, doesn't it?
Totally.
So, The Witch's Survival Guide, Spells for Healing from Stress and Burnout. That is the title of your new book. It fits in perfectly with what we're talking today. I have my copy on pre-order, and you can. Anyone listening to this now can also get theirs. It's on Amazon and
Waterstones.
Waterstones,
And it should be it should be in every bookshop, I think. No, it basically, it's out at the end of April, and I wanted it to come out in spring to coincide with the Festival of Beltane, which for me is this wonderful festival of fertility and also healing. So it just felt like the perfect time to think about how do we heal from this intense burnout that we've been experiencing, particularly over the past couple of years. But the term burnout has been around for decades. People really do want to heal, but we don't have the means quite yet. But because I have this experience with using witchcraft and nature to heal, I wanted to put all of the rituals and spells in one place. Things that I have used, things that people I know have used. So it's like a compendium of the rituals, charms, talismans, spell jars, lots of different means and methods that people can use to heal themselves from the trials and tribulations of the 21st century living.
Fantastic, because I when I read the Wheel, I think the Wheel is a great book to introduce to someone if someone thought that they might want to try magic or witchcraft. The Wheel is a great way in, and that book is almost more like a journal, isn't it, of as you go through the year. But it seems that and you can tell me if I'm wrong on this, but The Witch's Survival Guide is more of a practical magic book, something where people can pick it up and try some spells of their own.
That's right, yes. And it follows a structure of looking at the 4 elements. So all of the spells and rituals fall under a different element, so that they can be performed at a different time of year that corresponds with that element. So in summer you might choose to do more fire rituals, but also because witchcraft is that very personal thing, a lot of people don't resonate with particular elements. For me, the element of air just doesn't really factor into my practice. It's not something that really comes up for me a lot, whereas I use a lot of fire as a force behind my rituals and spells. So for me, fire is my go-to element, so I would use more of those rituals and spells. So I wanted to include a range that was suitable for lots of different people. I also wanted to make them quite accessible, because I know that within the witchcraft community, there can be these... I feel like I always talk about this, but I have a thing about people creating beautiful altars that you can take a picture of that have crystals worth hundreds of pounds on there. And you're looking at it going, wow, this is spectacular. This is what witchcraft is. When really those tools are not necessary for a witchcraft practice. All you need really is yourself, the 4 elements around you. Maybe you want a bowl to put some water in, but that's probably about it. A couple of candles. Witchcraft doesn't actually need that much. You don't actually need to buy much for it. You can find those things within nature. So I wanted to make sure that was part of the book as well, that spells and witchcraft can be accessible to everybody, no matter what their means, and that you can just go out into the woods and come back with a stick and say, this is my wand now. So yes, I wanted to make sure that was part of the book. So I feel that people reading it will get quite an immersive idea of what rituals and spells are available. But also those spells are targeted at healing from things like anxiety, self-sabotage, procrastination, all those things that come with low mood, and also seasonal affective disorder. So yes, I'm really hoping that the book is able to open doors for people.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, because I have that exact same attitude to magic, which I think is another way that I'm probably closer to witchcraft, is that I believe that all you need for witchcraft is just a patch of dirt and an intention, and from there you can just take it from there. And I really can't wait to read this book. I was also going to ask you, have you got any other projects coming up or anything like that you'd like to talk about whilst we're on here? So the book's coming out, is it the 27th of April?
That's right, yes.
Yeah. Have you got anything else that you're working on, or anything else that you'd like to talk about?
Yes, I do. So I have a my very first fiction book coming out this year as well. So I have a young adult novel coming out in September, which I'm very excited about because that has been sitting in my bottom drawer for many, many years. And I'm so glad that it's finally going to be out there. It's quite loosely based on the idea of the Pendle Witches, in that there is an ancient, like there's a legend within a town, but really it's focused on this obsessive friendship between three girls, but also dealing with issues of mental health, and being in a very rural setting and how cut off that can make people feel. So really it's quite a psychological book with a lot of witchcraft, because that is my one topic.
That sounds amazing. And as a young adult myself, I will be picking that book up.
And that's called The Black Hair, and it'll be released in September this year. And if you follow Jenn on Instagram, you'll be able to keep up with her updates.
Okay, so as I'd mentioned just before earlier, I myself suffer from seasonal affective disorder, and I have done for a long time. And I have it probably worse this year than I have in a long time, I think, because my family had COVID over Christmas again, and then stomach flu, and then tonsillitis, and it just went on, and I don't feel like I've rested. I don't feel like I've had Christmas, but I do get it every year, and I know I've been to a doctor about it, and I know that I just have to kind of wait it out effectively, and it will pass. But if anyone listening to this podcast today is really feeling down, or is really feeling they haven't felt this before and that they're starting with it now, or if they have felt it before but it's especially bad this year, just please go and speak to either your doctor, or a month ago I put in our show notes a list of helpful websites and phone numbers, which I will link to again in the show notes here. That's the place that you should be starting. But for people like me who I just feel a bit disconnected, I feel a bit down, I feel a bit unmotivated, I was wondering if you have any advice that you could give us as the Green Witch of our global village, whether there's any advice that you could give our listeners, magical or otherwise, of how they can, quick fixes that they can use to help get them through this dark period on their way to Ambulk.
Yeah, so we mentioned before about how it can be so difficult to get out in winter. We don't really want to. I know that it's rained pretty much solidly for the past 3 weeks, so I can totally see. But sometimes it's around bringing that nature inside. So I have an altar that I use as part of my witchcraft practice. It's a place that I go to meditate. I perform all my rituals there. It's portable, so I could take it around the house wherever I am. But I always find that bringing the elements inside onto the altar really helps me to reconnect with not only myself, but with the natural world. So I would advise bringing things that represent earth, air, fire and water into your space, making sure that they're part of your everyday life. Not necessarily cut flowers, those things, it's very like mass produced, but things that you've collected yourself, like conkers or pine cones, lighting some incense. I think surrounding yourselves with the depiction of the four elements can help to lift your mood. It can bring you out of that reverie that sometimes comes with depression or low mood. It's also around, connecting with the senses. So that's not necessarily a witchcraft thing, but like if I'm lighting incense or a scented candle, the sense of smell really helps to rejuvenate me. I have a lot of mint around the house as well. So for me, mint and sage and rosemary, those are all plants that represent happiness to me, particularly rosemary. They always say to have a living rosemary bush by your front door to bring joy to anyone who comes over your threshold. So I would say starting small in that way. You don't need to be doing major rituals to blast away any emotions at this stage. I think starting small, grounding yourself with the elements is the first point of call. And then you may feel that you want to progress onto something a bit more challenging, a longer ritual where you connect with a deity. But yes, I would make sure that you feel grounded in your own home and your own space, because that's likely to translate to your inner self as well.
Yeah, wonderful. I mean, that's really, really good advice. And I find that just a very small 5-minute ritual, doing it daily, provides a lot of comfort. I mean, I'm a person who quite likes routine anyway, but to have that sort of, it's a bit like the way that just going for a walk, or just doing, like 5 or 10 minutes of exercise can really improve your mood as well. That there's a certain, aside from the ritual itself, there's a certain way that sort of that repeated action can make you feel grounded, and I found that really helpful.
Completely.
And so we ask all of our guests this, but do you have any recommendations of any books that you found really helpful in your witchcraft journey, or just that you like? They don't have to be about witchcraft at all, or movies or music or anything that people who listen to this podcast might really get into.
So I'll start off with a couple of witchcraft books that have helped me in recent years. So I think the first one that was a real help in getting back into my witchcraft journey with the wheel was Hedge Witch by Ray Beth. And I think she was writing in the early 90s, and she writes letters to new witches that she's helping to help them rediscover their witchcraft practice. And so as I was reading that, I really connected with that. She goes through the seasons, she goes through the festivals. It's a lovely, gentle way back to the craft if you feel like you might have lost your way. Something more practical that I found recently was a book called Earth Magick by Lindsay Squires. She's called The Witch of the Forest on Instagram, and she writes in such a vibrant, colourful way. It's quite a thin book. It's not a challenging read that you need to go into and feel like, oh, I'm starting another book. It's really accessible, and I find that those blasts of magic in my life can really bring me out of myself if I'm struggling. A fiction book that's really helped me as well to feel connected to nature, and it's not something that I was expecting, but Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell, which won loads of prizes it's won so many prizes over the past couple of years. It's a depiction of Shakespeare and his wife, but basically we see Shakespeare's wife as a witch, and she talks about her personal practice and the way that she's connected to the land. And I just thought, wow, that is who I aspire to be. This one character in this book. And so for me, that really helped me to, I suppose, figure out what I wanted in my witchcraft journey and how I wanted to have this vision of the countryside as part of myself. Just that feeling of connection. So for me, those 3 books are just wonderful. I'd thoroughly recommend those. Not only for healing from any kind of mental health problems that you may be experiencing at the moment, but they're just excellent books.
Fantastic. That sounds absolutely amazing. And I'll link to all those in the show notes. And so finally, where can people find you and your work?
Yes, so I'm mainly active on Instagram. So you can find me at The Green Witch Writer. I also have a website, jenniferlanewrites.com, where you can book in for Reiki and find out more about my books. But yes, always drop me a DM and I'm really happy to answer any questions at all.
Fantastic. And so while we're talking about where you can find people, you can find Vayse on both Twitter and Instagram at Vayse, and then Vayse spelled backwards. So that's at VAYSEESYAV. You can email us on vayse.info@gmail.com. Any questions or queries, send them there. And we have banged on about it a lot, but I'm going to continue to do so. The soundtrack to the show is available on Bandcamp, and it's all done by Buckley here under the under the moniker of Polypores, and all of the proceeds from that album go back into the podcast to help us to afford to keep on doing this, to keep on getting guests, and to keep on talking to interesting people. So if you could also, it's really helpful to us. Thank you everyone who's been listening. We've really appreciate the numbers of people who are listening to the podcast, and if you enjoying the podcast, please subscribe, rate and review, because that is the thing that games the algorithms, makes more people discover the podcast, and will mean that we can continue to do this and continue to talk about interesting things to interesting people.
Yeah, I have one last question, Jen, before you go.
Go on, go for it.
Who's your favourite witch in pop culture? Grot bags.
I love grot bags.
Wicked Witch of the North, Wicked Witch of the West. Teabag. Do you remember Teabag?
Who's Teabag?
I remember Teabag.
You might be Teabag and T-shirt. She had like a little boy called T-shirt. I think it was probably.
You might be slightly too young. Yeah, you might be slightly too young. But she was a good witch. She was terrifying. Do you remember grot bags?
I don't remember grot
I
bags.
remember grot
Why
bags.
don't I remember that?
There was he had the guy who had the emu. Who was the guy with the emu?
Rod Hull.
Rod Hull. He had a pink windmill, and a witch called Grotbags used to come and try and defeat him. But
who's your favourite, Jen? We can't just we could be reminiscing all night here. We need to know your favourite.
I think my first introduction to witchcraft was Mildred Hubble from The Worst Witch, and that is still a cracking series, and I would read that again in a heartbeat. She was like this messy, chaotic kid with a scruffy cat, and I'm like, I think that's who I've based my life on, because that is me.
Excellent.
That is brilliant. Oh, thank you very, very much.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. We really appreciate it. It's been.
We stopped recording now, haven't we? Yeah.
No, we haven't.
Well, I mean, yeah.
This isn't going to be on the show.
No.
It could be if you want it to be.